Welcome to the Deeply Rooted Podcast. We're here to root deep in God's Word so that we can live lives of unshakable faith. I'm Ben Jacobson. I'm one of the pastors here at Hope Lutheran Church in Fargo, North Dakota, joined today by Pastor Sarah Seibold. Sarah, this is your first, not Deeply Rooted podcast, but your first video podcast. So welcome
Correct.
to the studio, and
Thank you.
glad to have you. And
Yeah.
we're hoping that video is just going to help us connect with more people and be a tool that we can use in lots of other ways so that our discussion that we have here can help other groups of people as they discuss the Bible too. So just an extension of what we've already begun. We are in our second week of our fall, winter, spring, deeply rooted narrative. So we're going to go through the whole story of the Bible. We're in the book of Genesis today. We started with creation last week, and now we're going to skip ahead. And we skipped some pretty important stories, but maybe we'll kind of pick us up on the way. But
good.
we're going to hear about someone whose name is Abraham. Before we get to Abraham, Sarah, I have a burning question.
Okay.
And it's this.
Okay.
What is one of your most prized possessions? And now I'm on the edge of my seat.
Right. I don't know.
You love
That's
it
horrible.
that much?
That's horrible to say.
Yeah, that's good. No, it's probably a good thing.
Like I honestly don't know. There's definitely things I have a lot of sentimental value that I placed on it, and I'll admit, like when I was younger, I had a lot of things that I was kind of romantic about in terms of holding on to them and the memories that surround the item. But after moving, I don't know how many times, and then also kind of just some spiritual work that I've done through Ignatian retreats and through spiritual direction, like there's still things that I have a great deal of sentimental value towards. Like I have some of my great grandparents' dishes and Bibles and hymnals and I love, like my grandmother, she had crackle glass all throughout her house, crackle glass pieces, and I have a few of them, and they sit on a windowsill in my dining room, and I love them, and they're beautiful. But I have to think to myself, like, okay, if they broke, I would cry. I'd be sad.
Yeah.
But I don't think I'd be devastated.
Yeah.
Because it's stuff.
Yep. So I think,
but I also don't want to but at the same time, I think you should ask my husband, Sean. He might have a better picture of what I'm actually, really tied to.
Yeah.
That's a really difficult question because right? I mean, my kids, my husband, it's people and not stuff. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, the classic way of asking the question when you're on the canoe trip is when you're canoeing and you're like, if your house was on fire, what would you run back in for? You know?
Right. Yeah.
And for me, it's like, well, if we're all out safe, I'm not going back in. There's nothing that I want from there.
Exactly.
It's I don't know. I mean, that's not to say that I don't have stuff that I enjoy and like. And, I've collected some guitars over the years that I would be sad to say goodbye to, but nothing is really, you learn to hold things loosely. But then once again, let's ask my wife. That might have an idea.
She might have a different answer. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, when I think about that though, it's sort of like you, a lot of the stuff that I treasure are things that are tied to people, right? So one of my favorite things that we have is we bought this blank recipe book, and we've had people write their recipes in, over time, like the ones that we love to make over and over again, and they're then tied to, this person's whatever bars or this person's whatever hot dish.
Yeah.
I'm still not running back in for it, but it reminds me of people in my life who have been important, and so stuff like that I think is great. Now, people are much harder to let go of.
Absolutely.
And that's what we're going to find here.
Yeah.
as we read. And so we're going to read from Genesis 21. I'll read verses 1 through 3, and then I'll read Genesis 22, verses 1 through 14, and we'll talk about it together.
Sounds good.
Now the Lord was gracious to Sarah, as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the very time God had promised him. Abraham gave the name Isaac to the son Sarah bore him. We'll skip ahead to chapter 22. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. Then God said, "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." Early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. He said to his servants, "Stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you." Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the 2 of them went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father Abraham, "Father." "Yes, my son," Abram replied. "The fire and wood are here," Isaac said. "But where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham answered, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." And the 2 of them went on together. When they reached the place God had told him about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. "Do not lay a hand on the boy," he said. "Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Abraham looked up, and there in the thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called that place, "The Lord will provide." And to this day it is said, "On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. What a story.
Yeah.
What a story. What do you notice? We always ask these 2 questions. What do you notice, and what things, or what big questions do you have? Sarah, what do you notice?
I always want to giggle for verse 1 through 3 of chapter 21, because Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age. She was old too.
Yeah, that's right.
She was pretty old. Right. And so I always kind of giggle, like, well, Abraham's old. Well, Sarah was too.
I can't remember when they first find out they're going to have a child. Abraham says something like, "Well, I'm old," but then he's very tactful and he says, "And my wife is advanced in years," or something like that.
He doesn't doesn't say you're old. Advanced in years.
Very smart man.
Yes, he was. And so and then there's so much.
So go ahead. There's a lot. Those 3 verses that we started with. Yeah. They're loaded with. I mean, there's miraculous things that happen in those verses. It's not as simple as, and there's a lot of story that leads up to that. Maybe we can cover a little bit of it, just the background of how we got to be where we are.
Yeah, because a lot of that gets wrapped up in this story, this command to sacrifice Isaac.
Right.
And as I read this, one is, when he talks about going up to the mountain to worship with Isaac, you think there would be like some alarm bells going off for Sarah and even for Isaac, right? Yep. Because he took the wood and he brings fire and a knife, but there's no actual sacrifice. And Isaac calls him out on that. I always kind of wonder, did Isaac have an inkling of what was happening?
Yeah.
Of what Abraham must have been up to.
The other question, or the other thing that I
Mhm.
noticed just as I'm reading that, and just while we're on this, is about Isaac. Is, we start chapter 22 with these words: "Sometime later, God tested Abraham." We
Mhm.
don't know how long that was,
No.
and so we don't know the age of
Mm-mm.
Isaac at this point. And it's interesting, if you look at various artwork,
Mhm.
you're going to see a variety of ages
Mhm.
for Isaac. And you would imagine, depending on that age, this story plays out very, very differently.
Mhm.
It talks about, one of the things I noticed is how he bound. It says in verse 9,
Mhm.
he bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar. Well, if he's young, that's easier than
Mhm.
if it's just terrible.
Right?
It's just hard to imagine.
Yeah.
But
But he
so
also
we
has
don't
to-
know the age, right?
But he also has to be old enough that he can carry the wood,
Yeah, right.
right?
Yeah.
Young enough that Abraham can bind him and place him on the wood, but
Yeah.
also big enough to carry the wood.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we don't know how old, and then I also wonder what's going on in Abraham as he's doing this.
Yeah.
Like where's his mind at?
Yep.
Yes, he has this command, but what was his internal,
Mhm.
his emotions, his
Mhm.
thoughts?
Mhm.
Because this is the son that God promised. And
Yeah.
through him, right, the nations would be blessed.
Yeah.
And his descendants would be more numerous than sand, right? And the stars in the sky. And
So it's not just, and let's revisit this,
yeah.
but it's not just Isaac that's on the altar.
No.
It's the whole promise,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's important.
Mhm.
Verse 8, one of my big questions, and then I'll ask you your big questions. Verse 8, it says, Abraham answered, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. This is after Isaac looks around and he's like, wait a second, something's missing here. Where's the lamb? And Abraham answers, God will provide it. My question is, does Abraham believe that at this moment? Or is he
Great question.
Is he just trying to move things along?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know the answer.
I don't either.
I think there's a hope in what he says.
Yes. I mean, he gets to the point where, okay, there's not a lamb here.
Yeah, right.
And he binds up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so if there was a ram, he looked up and saw the ram caught in the thicket by its thorns. When did that happen?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Of course, it could be miraculous. It could be something that they overlooked in the emotional state of the moment, knowing what he thought he had to do and what God was asking of him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as a parent, I can't even fathom.
Yeah.
I can't even fathom what would have been going on in Abraham's heart and mind.
No, and this was one of the first stories that we did on our Deeply Rooted podcast, and I approached it from that same, I approached it wondering how I don't even understand what's going on here. And I think I've had more clarity over the years as I've read this story, and maybe we'll get there today. Let's back up.
Oh, yes.
Let's back up. Who is Abram?
Abraham.
Well, first he was Abram, right? And
Chapter 12.
So who is he? Let's maybe go back so we had the creation, and God's people were, because of their sin, they were sent out into the world. There was a flood. God called Noah to deliver his family through the flood, to basically begin again.
Yes.
To repopulate the earth. God had made a covenant with Noah that Noah would be the one to repopulate the earth, essentially. And then, they do that, but sin is still a big problem. And so God, at the Tower of Babel, you can read this in chapter 11, God kind of scatters the nations throughout. And it's from those scattered peoples that we find Abram.
Yep.
Right.
But we can trace Abram back.
Yeah.
At least in the Bible, we trace Abram back to one of the three sons that Noah had, and it's Shem. And so Shem was 100 years old, and he became a father. I mean, this in chapter 11 starts the genealogy.
Right.
That leads us all the way up to chapter 12, which is Abram.
So then out of this big genealogy of people, God chooses Abram. We're not exactly told why, but God chooses Abram. And in chapter 12, this is what God says. He says, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. And then here comes the rest of the promise. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great. You will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all the peoples on earth will be blessed through you. So God gives this great promise to Abram. And then his name is eventually changed to Abraham, which, if I'm remembering correctly, means father of many nations. Which is tied up in the promise that has been made to him. But in order to be the father of many nations, you must be a father. Yeah. So what happens there?
Yeah. So, of course, Sarai, actually, and Abram, they are she's barren. They don't have children for many years. And then Abram thinks to himself, well, God's made this promise. I need to have a kid. I'm going to have a kid with one of the servants. And so then we have the birth of Ishmael. And but then, of course, Sarai is very jealous of Ishmael and Hagar and is unkind to them.
Which is just a reminder of families in the Bible usually experience lots of distress, like families in our world.
Yep.
Right? There's and that's one of the common threads between us and them is here are people who are trying to figure things out and they don't get it right. And
and the many times that Abraham, when they were traveling and going from his father's house and traveling, his wife was beautiful, and they'd stop in a land and, oh no, this is not my wife. This is my cousin. This is my sister. This is, and then of course, God makes it known. This is not, do not be with this woman because this is Abraham's wife. So, I mean, there's a lot of mess ups. There's a lot of, they're trying to follow God's will, but they do it really imperfectly. And yet God gets them where they need to be.
Yes, exactly. So they get to this point where they have a child.
Yep.
And, I love the name Isaac. It means laughter, right? And the reason they name him Isaac is because when Sarai was first told that she was going to have a child, because of her advanced years, she said, that's not possible. And she laughed. And then God, of course, when God makes a promise, that promise happens.
Yep.
And so they name the child Laughter. Now, the irony of that is there's no laughing here.
No.
There's nothing to laugh about in this moment because here God says, okay, here's the son. Here's the promise coming finally to fruition. You're going to see, you can finally see it. And then God makes this request of Abraham. We can call him Abraham now at this point. It says, sometime later, God tested Abraham. Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go and sacrifice him there as a burnt offering. What do you think's going through Abraham's mind in that point?
I'd be fighting with God in my head. I mean, I would.
I would too.
In my heart and in my head, I'm like, excuse me? You finally made this promise come to be, and now what you're going to... What are you doing? How is this? This is my son whom I love. I mean, that's what God says. This is your son whom you love, right? Your only son. So yeah, I would think somewhere in there, Abraham would have been in shock and dismay. And me personally, I would have been angry. And yet it just jumps right to verse 3, which is, so Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took his 2 young men with him and his son Isaac. Yeah. Right? I mean, it just, and yet, I don't know, as a parent, I just can't wrap my head around that.
Yeah. I don't know that I can either. One of the things that Abraham is known for and we see this throughout Scripture. Abraham's talked about quite a bit in the letters of Paul and in other places. And his faith is the thing that we marvel at, and rightly so, because what does he do? He gets up. But there's more, I think, if we read between the lines, and I think you have something to tell us about that.
I brought one of my favorite things to read when I was in seminary was Kierkegaard's writing "Fear and Trembling" is the name of the writing that he did on Abraham and on the promise of God to Abraham and Sarah, and specifically on this moment of this sacrificial moment. And I appreciated what he wrote here, where on page 28 in my book, it says, "There were countless generations who knew the story of Abraham by heart, word for word. But how many did it render sleepless? The story about Abraham is remarkable in that it always is glorious no matter how poorly it is understood. But here again, it is a matter of whether or not we are willing to work and be burdened. But we are unwilling to work, and yet we want to understand the story. We glorify Abraham, but how? We recite the whole story in cliches. The great thing was that he loved God in such a way that he was willing to offer him the best. This is very true, but the best is a vague term. Mentally and orally, we homologize Isaac and the best."
That's a big word.
I know.
I don't know that I've actually ever heard that word.
I know, did he make that one up? Yeah. He is Danish. I mean, I don't know. And the contemplator can very well smoke his pipe while cogitating, and the listener may very well stretch out his legs comfortably. And then he writes this: "If that rich young man whom Jesus met along the way had sold all his possessions and given the money to the poor, we would praise him as we praise every great deed, even if we could not understand him without working. But he still would not become an Abraham, even though he sacrificed the best. What is omitted from Abraham's story is the anxiety. Because to money I have no ethical obligation, but to the Son, the Father has the highest and holiest." And I sit and ponder with that, how when we read between the lines and when he tells his son, God himself will provide a lamb for the burnt offering. Was he himself in denial that he's actually got to go through with this? And the whole process as he's going up the mountain with Isaac, as he's binding his son and laying him on the way. I mean, I would be shaking and in tears the whole time, even if I was trying to act out of faithfulness to God. And so I wonder about that for Abraham. Is yes, he is a man of incredible faith, but think about Isaac, think about Sarah, think about even the men who went with them to the mountain, and knowing that there's no lamb, knowing that there's no burnt offering, what's happening here?
Yeah.
And what kind of anxiety was actually in that moment?
Yeah. What I love about what you just read is I think it's easy for us to sit and think about the story, right? Which is what he's saying. He's saying, hey, people have thought about this and they've figured it out in their head. Yeah. This is it, and this is why. But when we do that, we sanitize the experience of the fear and the anxiety. And we often say things like, put faith over fear, which I think is a good thing to do. But usually the two of them actually run side by side. Yeah. And as we're pulled back and forth, as we put our faith, we're being pulled back by fear. And it's sort of this tension. And certainly Abraham must have known that and felt that.
Yeah. I have to remember, even though we put Abraham on a pedestal, he is the father of our faith in many ways. He is a human being. He wasn't the Lamb of God. Jesus is the Lamb of God. So he wasn't perfect in his faith. While he had great examples of walking out his faith, so much of his story is about the missteps he took. And so I can only imagine that during this moment with his son, he was close to missteps.
Yeah, I'm sure he was, as I would be.
I would be too. The fear would, you're riding alongside both fear and faith.
And he had seen over and over God's faithfulness. And that's probably what propelled him forward. Yeah. But, one of as I've been thinking about this story, one of the things that I think is interesting and important for us to take away is I think we want our faith to be formulaic And we want our experience of faith to be like getting on the highway and we hop on and then our exit comes and we hop off.
And make sure to zipper merge.
Yes. We should do a PSA on a
Right, yes,
zipper merge. It's tough for some of us.
Yes.
It's not as simple as God makes a promise and it happens the next day.
Mm-hmm.
Abraham had to wait. And he had to wait for God's timing, which is the right timing. And he had to be prepared and readied. And, God sees the whole, we see our slice. And so sometimes it's easy for us to get bogged down in the moment that's in front of us.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, that's one of the things that's helpful about this story.
Mm-hmm.
As I've wrestled with this story, I think the other piece is, if I'm trying to think to myself, what is the core of this story truly about? And I wonder, I oftentimes get uncomfortable with the phrase, God tested Abraham.
Mm-hmm.
But God is testing Abraham to make sure that his heart is rightly aligned, to be the one to fulfill the promise, to be the instrument that God uses. God needs him to be faithful in this certain way. And so he has to be able to say, yes, God, I trust you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the core of the test that's here is, Abraham, can you put me first, even at the expense of what you think is the most important?
Yeah. It reminds me of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane.
Yeah.
When he prays, Lord, take this cup from me, but not my will, your will, right? And Jesus' ability to ransom his own life so that others would be saved.
And I think if we read this story and we didn't get to the sacrifice of a son, we would be missing where the story's going. So in the third chapter of Genesis, we had this moment where God promises that the seed of Adam and Eve will eventually launch God's restoration of the world. And we've seen that. If you were to read from Genesis 3 to where we are now in Genesis 22, you'd see that seed, the generations of people that God uses to advance his kingdom and to move the story towards where ultimately it's going. Abraham is one of those people. And the seed of Abraham, if we go back to chapter 12, verse 3, I will bless those who bless you, whoever curses you I will curse, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. That's a reminder that what happens to Abraham and the promise that's given to him, and you already said this, I'm just going to restate it. It's not just about him. It's not just about him and his family. It's about the whole world.
Right.
And so who is that seed? Well, it's the ultimate sacrifice that God provides. Because there's that moment, Abraham says, God himself will provide the lamb. Well, he does.
He does.
Twice. Not just the one that's caught.
Right.
By its horns.
Yeah.
In the thicket. There's another one who's caught in a crown of thorns.
Yeah. Yeah. There's this sets up so much of why Jesus was God's timing, God's plan, God's purposes, right? Salvation of the world. And this sets that all up so wonderfully. As the father of our faith, Abraham, he began to do what Jesus ultimately could only do.
Yes. The Lord will provide a sacrifice. I love that closing too. The way that our story closed at verse 14 is, the Lord will provide, which is such an amazing promise for us when we look at a world that seems to be full of scarcity and violence and pain and hurt and suffering and sin, to remember the Lord will provide. And so I hope that's what our listeners will remember today, that ultimately, one, God is moving us to a new place, that through the sacrifice of his son, we have forgiveness of sins and a new life, but also this promise that in your life today, now, God is providing for you. And maybe it's not in ways that you expected or imagined. Maybe it's probably not a ram stuck in the bushes, but it might be surprising in that way.
Yes.
We'll continue next week, and we'll continue to track this seed as the promise continues to grow. Sarah, thank you for today.
Yeah.
By the way, I was going to tell you, I've had multiple people over the summer when you were on, you talked about Superman ice cream.
Oh, yes.
I've been told multiple places where you can get it. So as soon as we close this podcast, I'm going to tell you.
Can I tell you one of my places that I found it?
Yeah.
At Walmart.
Oh.
There's a Hudsonville brand.
Oh, Superman
and
ice
it's called
cream.
Super Scoop.
Super Scoop.
Yep.
Super Scoop. We're back again next week, folks. You can go get your ice cream between now and then. And want to make sure that you share this podcast, that you subscribe. We're video now, so you can send it to someone and say, hey, watch this. These are my pastors, and this is the Bible that I like to read, and all that good stuff, right? Share it because it helps us to spread the word. We're back again next week. In the meantime, stay deeply rooted.